Hi. I just talked through the entirety of Field Trip and realized I haven't been recording anything. So, let's go back. Back for me. Just now for you. I don't know what happened. I very rarely do that, especially for like 20 minutes of talking, but here we are. Welcome. We are here to talk about the things they carried. This is the penultimate discussion of the things they carried by Tim O'Brien. We're going to talk about, I don't know what I told you at the end of last time that we would talk about, but we are definitely going to talk about Field Trip, Ghost Soldiers, and Nightlife. And then I will do another post in November about the Lives of the Dead, which is the last story. And then in December, we'll do just a checkup, wrap up, pull the whole thing together video, although a lot of that will happen in the Lives of the Dead discussion. So yeah, we are almost done and there's still so much to talk about. So in Field Trip, we have a couple of things to point out. And because I just talked this through with you, even though I wasn't recording, I can maybe be a little bit more concise and move a little quicker than I normally do. I'm pretty meandery with these, I know, and thanks to those who enjoy them that way. I also enjoy them that way, but I will probably summarize what I've already summarized since I've already given this talk just a few moments ago. So Field Trip, it's another one of those stories where fictional Tim O'Brien is going to tell you some kind of event or truth. It's one of those chapters, kind of like notes, where he's giving you some insight, but it's also like The Man I Killed, because is that the one where he's talking to his daughter? So Kathleen, the fictional daughter, features in this. And this takes place, Kathleen is born halfway between where fictional Tim O'Brien is now and fictional Tim O'Brien's time in Vietnam. So 20 years ago, at the time of Field Trip, fictional Tim O'Brien, was losing Kiowa in the muck field. It's too early to say in the video to say what the field is actually made of, but if you've been reading, you know. It is 20 years since that happened. And he is now taking his 10-year-old daughter on a trip around the world, but really it's a trip to give Kiowa his moccasins. And so that includes a baptism. It's a planned baptism. And there's a really touching and beautiful moment or allusions to the actual drowning scene as seen in those couple of chapters that we've already gone over. When fictional Tim O'Brien takes a wrapped package that he has brought with him from the States with this intention of taking it to the spot in the field where they lost him, he unwraps the moccasins and he puts them in the muck, and the muck consumes them. And that happens on page 178. And if you look back on page 164, you're going to see some similarities. So on 164, it says there was an arm and a wristwatch and part of a boot. There were bubbles where Kiowa's head should have been. Then we go to page 177, and fictional Tim O'Brien is taking off his own wristwatch before he wades into the muck. And then on page 178, he places the moccasins on the muck so that they can sink down to Kiowa. And it says tiny bubbles broke the surface. So reading those in connection to that description on 164 of Kiowa, you see the wristwatch, the bubbles, and the moccasins replacing the boots. you see those. So there's like this full circle closure moment for Kiowa, but it's also a baptism moment for Tim O'Brien, because he establishes in this chapter that he has kind of personified and moralized this field that they lost Kiowa in. He feels the guilt of it. We know Norman Boker felt the guilt of it. We know Jimmy Cross felt the guilt of it. They're carrying this loss. It's one of the things that they carry. Those moccasins are one of the things he's been carrying. The guilt, he's been carrying it, but he knows that he has placed all of his inaction in the last 20 years, all of his choices made and not made in the last 20 years, all of the things that he's lost and the ways that he's changed and the dreams that no longer are dream worthy, all of those things, he has placed them within the power of this field, of the memory of this field. And so on page 176, we read this. Behind me, Kathleen let out a little giggle. The interpreter was showing her magic tricks. There were birds. He's standing in the field. He's standing next to the field. There were birds and butterflies, the soft rustlings of rural anywhere. Below, in the earth, the relics of our presence were no doubt still there. The canteens and bandoliers and mess kits. This little field, I thought, had swallowed so much. My best friend, my pride, my belief in myself as a man of some small dignity and courage. Still, it was hard to find any real emotion. It simply wasn't there. After that long night in the rain, I had seemed to grow cold inside. All the illusions gone, all the old ambitions and hopes for myself sucked away into the mud. Over the years, that coldness had never entirely disappeared. There were times in my life when I couldn't feel much, not sadness or pity or passion, and somehow I blamed this place for what I had become, and I blamed it for taking away the person I had once been. For 20 years, this field had embodied all the waste that was Vietnam, all the vulgarity and horror. Now it was just what it was, flat and dreary and unremarkable. And then he goes into the muck. He gives Kiowa his moccasins. And when he's coming out, Kathleen says to him at the end of page 179, Kathleen says to him, that old guy over there who's been watching you, that farmer who's mentioned earlier in the chapter, says he's mad at you or something. Or is he mad at you or something? And fictional Tim O'Brien says, I hope not. He looks mad. No, I said, all that's finished. So he's had this baptism moment where he has been cleansed in the muck of the muck that got him in the first place. And I think that, it's really dangerous to do this because, remember, a true war story doesn't have a moral. There it is. It is what it is. And in fact, on page 178, fictional Tim O'Brien literally says, well, I finally managed. There it is. It is what it is. There it is, man. There it is. So what I'm about to do with the end of this is maybe not what I'm supposed to do with it. But I read that as, the old man is the past, and it's the moralization of the field. It's the personification of the field as the monster, the thing that ruined Tim O'Brien, fictional Tim O'Brien. It is the representative of the war and the loss and the cowardice and all of those things that we have been establishing over and over and over and over again in the reading of this book. And now this baptism has ended all of that. He is free of that guilt. He no longer has to think that the past is mad at him. He no longer has to carry that. He can actually say, actually, I don't think that that's a thing anymore. I don't think the past is mad at me anymore. So, again, that's a moral though, right? And a true war story has no moral. If it has a moral, it isn't true. So, let's keep going. In Ghost Soilders, there are some things to note. I think mostly what I suggest you focus on when you're reading Ghost Soldiers is finding those references to things that we've already seen. There's a big question you need to ask yourself as you read both Ghost Soldiers and Nightlife, and that is, why are these two stories right here? And that question will make the existence of that question will make more sense when you read the final story, which they precede. It's a curious placement. It's a curious placement of these two stories, in my opinion. And I don't know that I've ever satisfactorily answered that for myself, but it's a curious placement, and it's something to think about, and it's something to ask yourself, especially after you've read the final story. So that's one thing that we'll go back and we'll think about a little bit in our very last video, but I don't know that I will have anything satisfying to say to you about it, but we'll ponder it together. And the other thing that I think that you can really kind of follow in this is those reiterations of who people are, like Azar is still Azar, and who's present in this story, who is no longer present. Norman Boker is in this story, and how are things going for him in this story? Henry Dobbins is telling stories, and there's a certain rhythm to the stories he's telling, and it's Henry Dobbins who's doing the yo-yo earlier in the book in a previous story, and that has a certain rhythm to it. So it's like a reestablishment or a re-entry back into the moment in the past that we are supposed to be in, even though at the end of Field Trip, we've kind of released ourselves from it. We've kind of left it, but now we're going back, Ghost Soldiers. So that title in and of itself is quite important, particularly based on the series of stories we just read and that aha moment or that letting go moment that we've just seen Tim O'Brien have. So I don't want to go too deeply into a lot of this, but those are some things that you can be looking at. And you can also look at the bottom of page 194 where Azar says, they're talking about what's real and what's not real. And Azar, of all people, says, what's real? 8 months in Fantasyland. It tends to blur the line. Honest to God, I sometimes can't remember what is real. And then the first word on the next page is psychology. On page 197, we see the reference to that coldness that he talks about in Field Trip. But remember, this is like in Vietnam, so this is 20 years in the past from that coldness that he's talking about realizing existed in Field Trip. So he says, there was that coldness inside me. I wasn't myself. I felt hollow and dangerous. There are definitely some things that we're going to come back to after we finish reading the book, but I won't tell you about them right now because it's more fun to find them at the very end. You can find Marianne from Sweetheart of the Song Trebong on page 199 if you read carefully. It says, I was down there with him, inside him. I was part of the night. I was the land itself, everything, everywhere, the fireflies and patties, the midnight rustlings, the cool phosphorescent shimmer of evil. I was atrocity. I was jungle fire, jungle drums. I was the blind stare in the eyes of all those poor, dead ex-pals of mine, all the pale young corpses, Lee Strunk and Kiowa and Kurt Lemon. It was the beast on their lips. I was Nom, the horror and the war. So I've written a note for myself from a long time ago. I wrote this note, and that's on page 199, and I wrote, he's not carrying anything anymore. He has become it. Just like Marianne became it. On page 200, I want you to mark this. We'll come back to it. It says, you learn finally that you'll die, and so you try to hang on to your own life, that gentle, naive kid you used to be. But then after a while, the sentiment takes over and the sadness because you know for a fact that you can't ever bring any of it back again. Down lower, there's a line in the first full paragraph. It says, there was nothing moral in the world. The night was absolute. And we got Azar being Azar. On page 202, there's this feeling of playing at war. On page 203, in the middle of that long block of writing, I've marked, I smelled myself dying. And then to wrap it all up, I've written these notes for myself. Common enemy equals a family. So if you have a common enemy, then those with whom you share that enemy, they are your family. And then I've also said there must always be an enemy, always a war, and the target can change from moment to moment. One moment it's an ally, and the next it's a stranger. And then we have nightlife. For almost 2 weeks, I'm on page 208. For almost 2 weeks, Sanders said they lived the nightlife. So that's like night duty, like what you just read about in Ghost Soldiers, where everybody's kind of on the cusp of going insane. And it says for 2 weeks, Sanders said they lived the nightlife. That was the phrase everyone used, the nightlife, a language trick. It made things seem tolerable. So, I mean, in war, we always use euphemisms to soften the blow of reality. Always. And here they're using it to soften the blow of their own reality. Nightlife is very short. To an extent, okay, on page 210, it says, to an extent, though everybody was feeling it, the long night marches turned their minds upside down. All rhythms were wrong. There's a certain rhythm to the story as it's being told. There's a certain rhythm to life. There's a certain rhythm. And when everything is off rhythm, it's terrifying. Terrifying. That's why they use that's how they create scary music in horror movies. The nights got freaky. He said he was scared. Yeah, the nightlife is a terrible thing. On page 212, we're almost done for today. On page 212, it says how crazy it was that people who were so incredibly alive could get so incredibly dead. This whole war, he said, you know what it is? Just one big banquet. Meat man, you and me, everybody. Meat for the bugs. Trying to cheer him up with stuff about the great life in Japan. Page 39 and page 23. Yeah, okay. How crazy it was that people who were so incredibly alive could get so incredibly dead. On page 39, we see you can't fix your mistakes. Once people are dead, you can't make them undead. How you could go from being so incredibly alive to so incredibly dead. And then on page 23, we see, Kyo is right, boom down and you were dead, never partly dead. 212 and 39. Once dead, you were dead, dead, dead. But the next chapter is the lives of the dead. And it starts with this. It starts with this. But this too is true. Stories can save us. I'm 43 years old and a writer now, and even still, right here, I keep dreaming Linda alive. Linda? Who the heck is Linda? Linda is who we've been reading about this entire time. And I look forward to showing you how that is in the next video. Until then, until we meet again, read the end. Read the end, blow your mind. And I will see you a little later this month to talk about the lives of the dead, because we've finally gotten to the point that we've been working towards this entire time, and it's about to get so good. So good. Until then, let's go read.